So let's talk about diving a little bit more into our mental models and thinking about what influences your mental models. Because I'm looking around the room right now, and what I am noticing is a lot of similarities in the room. There's a lot of us who are very similar. Probably, I'm going to guess how our gender identity is going to be very similar. I think a lot of us might fall into similar age ranges. I think a lot of us might fall into similar cultural spaces too. I think we have some diversity in the room, but there's also certainly a majority in the room if we think about our culture and those kinds of experiences. So all of those kinds of social identities. Without diving in deeper, there's all kinds of other aspects of who we are and what our social identity is. So this is a social identity wheel up here. So now this is another one I should say, educationally speaking. I suspect probably we have a lot of folks here who are going to be in similar spaces in terms of having higher education, having obtained college level degrees and things like that. A lot of us that have very similar experiences in our workspace, where we've maybe worked in the educational environment, or we've worked in an ISD environment, or we've worked in sort of those family spaces. So there's a lot of similarities like that too. So we're going to have a lot of things in common probably if we were all to sit down and do our social identity wheels together. But this just kind of gives you a view of all of the different pieces and parts that make up one human in terms of that social identity. These pieces and parts also have a huge influence on your mental models. A lot of these pieces and parts you acquire as you go through life. And sometimes they shift and they change. But as you're acquiring them, those are all things that are based on those lived experiences again. And all of those things are going to influence your mental models. Your mental models are how you see the world. So this is a huge, huge thing for us to be thinking about in terms of how we interpret the systems that we're going to then be looking at. The frame that we talked about earlier, the lens that we talked about earlier, how you're seeing things through that frame, what you're going to tune into, or the pieces that you will tune into are all influenced by this. They're influenced by your mental models. They also influence your effort, where you will choose to put in effort, where you will choose to work. They also influence how you will accept data, what speaks to you, what you notice in data, how you accept it, whether you really buy into it or you don't, or you have doubts, or you really think it's the greatest thing. They also influence how you see the big picture and whether or not you consider different perspectives. All of these things influence those mental models. So I'm surfacing this so that we are thinking about mental models always as that foundation piece, that underlying space of how are you going to look at the rest of your system? Because your mental models are going to have an impact on how you look at the rest of your system. All right, really quick, if everybody could, stand up for me. And we're going to do a really fast thing. So what I need for you to do, I'm going to try to get where everybody can still kind of see me. Kind of have your arms at your sides, kind of shake them out a little bit. I am going to give an instruction. I am going to say 1, 2, 3, go. And when I say go, I need everybody to clap. So put your hands out in front of you now. Again, I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, go. That's when you clap. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, go. Gotcha, yeah. Well, I'm not trying to gotcha. What just happened? Your brain, in an instant, processed multiple pieces of stimuli. I told you I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, go, clap. But then I said 1, 2, 3, go. And you responded to it before I had a chance to say go. All right, go ahead and have a seat. So the reason for doing that with you was because what I wanted to do is I wanted to really have you understand something that we call the ladder of inference. And that was a really simple illustration, but the ladder of inference is huge. This is something else that I love. This is my ladder. I have this tiny little ladder that sits on my desk all the time because this is a reminder to me that, am I on the ladder? Because this is a huge tool I want you to really be thinking a lot about. All right, so on an average day, each one of us makes about 32,000 decisions. The vast majority of these decisions are functional or unconscious decisions, maybe even things that are, we consider to be very mundane. So sometimes the decisions surface to the point of our awareness, where we are actually giving a little bit of thought to those decisions, but many of our decisions are things that are just automatic, that we're running on autopilot. When things do surface to this level, kind of like I'm aware of it, but it's still pretty much a functional decision, it might be something like, do I want to go get more water right now? Do I need to refill my coffee? Or, do I have time to run to the bathroom real quick between meetings? Or, oh shoot, dog needs to go out, I can jump up right now and let the dog out. So those are quick little decisions that you might be aware of making, right? But when we start to think about some of those bigger decisions that take a lot more of our brain, imagine if our brain required this much effort for every single one of those 32,000 decisions. You'd short circuit. There's no way you could do it. If you had to process each one of just think about, I'm going to brush my teeth. I have to think. My brain has to decide to take my toothbrush. I have to decide to grab the tooth. I have to decide how much to put on. I have to decide how long, where am I brushing and how long am I brushing. I have to decide. All those are rapid fire decisions. If we had to sit and think through every one of those decisions all day long, it would be impossible. Our brains couldn't do it. So what happens is our brains are built for efficiency. Our brains are built to rapidly take in information, rapidly process the information, and rapidly determine an action that needs to follow. The way that our brain does this is by using what we call the ladder of inference. It starts here, down at the bottom, information and experiences around me. Those are your mental models. Those are things that are in your lived experience. Your brain stores all of that information. I know sometimes I think I don't remember things, but it's in there. Your brain takes that in and stores that information, that those mental models and those beliefs. Then there are things that you notice. So for example, I'm taking a drink, and I notice I'm getting a little bit low. So I've now added a little bit of information that I just observed, and now I'm going to add my own meaning. Oh, I'm not going to have enough to get me through my next meeting. Because I know about, from my experience, I know how much I might drink during a meeting. I just noticed I'm running a little low, and I've added meaning to the fact that I'm running a little low. I probably am not going to have enough to get me all the way through. So I develop a belief that I need to refill my water, and I get up, and I go, and I refill my water. So I just went up that ladder. But it happens in a millisecond. So in a millisecond, I take a drink, and I go all the way up the ladder. And I stand up, and I walk out to go refill my water. I might not even have been conscious of making the decision. My brain did it that fast. And our brains do that about 32,000 times a day, over and over and over. And then, oftentimes what happens is, it worked for me. I got up in between meetings and I refilled my water, and I didn't run out. So the next time, I'm going to do it again. Because I just reinforced that that was a good decision. So my brain will make the same decision again. Does that make sense? So these could be things like, gosh, I'm feeling a little bit chilly, and I just noticed that the wind has picked up, and it looks like a storm is rolling in, so I'm going to go get a blanket. And then the next time I start noticing that a storm is rolling in, I might be even faster to go get a blanket if it worked for me the first time. So just a silly example, but that's what we're talking about in terms of the ladder. So in the last, that's my beautiful ladder that I was supposed to be pointing to that whole time. See it? It looks great. Okay. Oh. No, this is the right ladder, Heather. Sorry, looking at two screens. Okay, let me do it on here. This is gonna work. In the last game that we played, the information and experiences that you had, I gave you the information. I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, go, and then I want you to clap. That was the information I gave you. You have past experiences probably where you've done similar things where somebody said, okay, when I say 1, 2, or even as a kid, when, on your mark, get set, and go, and then you run, or, I'm going to say Simon Says, or, so you had some past experiences with that as well, too. So you were already probably tuning into what's going to happen here. Like, what is she doing this for? What are we going to, okay, and that on your mark, get set, go thing was deeply seated in your brain somewhere, too, probably. So all those things your brain's processing in the background. And then I give you the information. This is what I'm going to say. Then you start to notice around you that, okay, I've got my arms out, I'm ready, And then what happens is in a millisecond, I say 1, 2, 3, and your brain goes, oh, there it is. That was what we were waiting for the clap. That was what and you add the meaning and you take action. Your belief happens in an instant, I'm supposed to clap, and you do it. Even though the cue was go, then clap. But in an instant, you went up that ladder. So this is what I'm saying, I'm supposed to push the buttons. That's your information around you when I said it's going to be that combination of that you're hearing these cues, that lived experience, you're adding your own meaning to it, your brain is processing it in a millisecond, and then you act. And then the next time, if I were to say to you now, if I were to say stand up, let's do it again, 1, 2, 3, a lot of you probably would be like, no, I got new information now, my belief system has changed, I can override that instinct to clap, and your action would look different. Because we've interrupted that reinforcing loop. Is that making sense? Okay, so the reason that I'm really spending some time on this is because the ladder, we call this the ladder of inference, I've given you in your binder, you don't have to get them out, but in your binders I've given you copies of your own ladder to look at. You can also go to the Thinking Tools Studio. There's a couple of awesome courses on the ladder. But the ladder is something that you get on without realizing you're on it, and you make decisions that are being reinforced by those mental models. All this stuff down at the bottom, in the gray, all this stuff down here is going to influence the decisions you make. Sometimes without you even realizing it's influencing the decisions that you make. So, one of the things that I want to encourage you to do is to build an awareness of when you're on the ladder. The ladder and the symbol of having, this is why this is on my desk, because it symbolizes to me, am I on the ladder? Am I acting right now or reacting or deciding because I'm on the ladder? And do I need to back myself up? Because every ladder, as you know, you can go up and you can come down. So sometimes it takes that conscious decision to say, I'm going to back down the ladder. I want to examine the belief that I've just got, the meaning that I've added. Why did I add that meaning? What was at the root? Is it personal? Is it based on something that is part of my belief system, my culture? Is it something that I noticed? Is it a mental model that I hold? So consciously going back down the ladder brings you into a space where you can begin to think purposefully about how are you being influenced by those mental models, those inherent biases, those past experiences. Because just because the experience happened once doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen again. Or just because I think this way doesn't mean that's how everybody else thinks. I hold this belief. Certainly we know others hold different beliefs. So it's important that we're always examining from that lens. Okay. So I want to get myself back into a space so I know what I'm doing next, because I want us to revisit our habits cards for just a minute. Oh, that's my circle. There we go. And just talk about how, I just want to weave in a habit to talk about how we can do this throughout the work. Those habits cards become a tool for you. So thinking about the ladder, the test assumption, you'll notice, I've got it up here on the screen for you. You'll notice there's a little ladder right on the back of that card. And so going up that ladder and intentionally coming back down is the habit of testing assumptions. It's asking yourself those questions. Am I making a judgment because I have made a certain assumption based on a mental model or based on past experience, a belief I hold, information that I got? So it's a habit. And that test assumption card, if you think you're on the ladder, you pull out your test assumption card, you flip it over, and you look at those questions that are on the back of that card to help you think about how to reframe or how to pause. Questions that might be helpful to examining where you are at on the ladder. Okay, and then I want to show you some questions that you can ask yourself while you're on the ladder. So these are some additional helpful questions. You've got your ladder card, your test assumption card, but you can also ask yourself some questions like, is this the right conclusion? Why am I making these assumptions? Why do I think this is the right thing? Is it really based on facts? Questions to ask when you're examining your thinking while you're going down the ladder. Why have I chosen this? What belief led to this action? Why did I draw the conclusion? So those are some of the questions that I've kind of already explained. So helping you to think about the ladder. And we'll bring that up periodically this afternoon as well, thinking about the ladder. Okay. Let's do a little bit of work about system structure, then we're going to do an activity, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Noel to take us home for a few things before lunchtime. I'm looking at you, Noel, because I'm watching the time too, and we're racing here. Okay, so system structure. I'm going to really do a quick little thing. So I brought a system with me. I brought a really simple system. Everybody knows what this is, right? Can you sing the song? Slinky, fun is a wonderful toy. Okay, sorry, I am an early childhood person too. Okay, so I have a system right here I brought with me. This is my system. And so what I'm going to do is I want to ask you to make an observation. So I've got my Slinky here. I'm going to take an action. I'm going to leverage a change to this system. I want you to watch. You ready? 1, 2, 3. So what happened? Anyone? What did you see? I took my hand away. Yes. And then what's happened to my system? It's bouncing. My system, the whole system really experienced a change, right? There was a pretty significant effect. So that was a pretty strong leverage action that I just took. So I'm going to ask you to watch again, okay? I'm going to do another change to my system. Ready? 1, 2, 3. What did you notice? Yeah, nothing really changed, right? I mean, I bumped the top of it a little bit, but my system is still pretty stable. So I took an action, but it clearly wasn't a lot of leverage behind that action, right? This is how most systems behave. System structure is the system structure, and then we take leverage actions that impact the system. Sometimes those actions have a big effect. Sometimes those actions might, or I might bump it a little. It might hit, well, I suppose if I really bumped it, it would fall off my hand like something. But it might go crooked, but it might stay stable. A minor effect, right? So when we think about a system, what's really important to notice is this is the structure that I started with. My structure never changed. My structure came down and it's having an impact on the structure, but it's still the same structure. I can still collapse it back together again. So I can impact and go sideways. I can take and make impacts to the system, but the system structure is pretty stable. That's pretty much going to stay just how it was. How our systems then are built, they're pretty stable for the most part until we start taking actions to try to leverage changes or to try to make impacts to the system. Some actions are big, some actions are small, and everything in between. A system is a group of interacting, interrelated, interdependent components that form a complex and unified whole. Understanding our systems, as we said at the very beginning with our Elena Aguilera quote, we cannot understand the behavior of a whole system by studying only one part or parts in isolation. We have to look at the whole system to understand. And thinking in systems means We can't impose our will on a system. We can listen to what the system tells us and discover how its properties and our values, those habits, those mental models, can work together to bring forth something much better that could ever be produced by our will alone. And Donella Meadows is an icon in systems thinking, so she's written a book that I'm going to think the name of right now. Amazing, though. If you really get into systems thinking and you find you're enjoying it, Donella has some great stuff out there. So, I want to practice some habits. I want to practice some habits around structure-generating behavior. This is one of our habits cards that a systems thinker recognizes that a system's structure generates its behavior. So that's what we were talking about here. This structure generates this bouncing behavior. If I had come up here and I had a ball of string in my hand, and I was holding the ball of string, and then I let go, that ball of string would behave much differently because the structure is completely different. So we want to focus on how a structure generates behavior and those leverage actions that we take and that circular nature of how a system will continue to function. So what I want to do is I want to create a simple system and we're going to study it. Hoping that you'll be game to play because I have something I want us to do. I would like for the folks who are here from our Family Engagement Centers to participate, facilitators to step back and just watch. So we have, because we're going to have a lot of people doing this. And I do believe that the best way for us to do this is to step outside. I think it was still not too hot, and we can go right out this door right here, and we can go right out into the parking lot because we need some room to move. And you will begin to move so that you can get yourself equidistant between your two reference points. And you will continue to do that until I say stop. Any questions? Okay. Let's come back out here. Yeah, right? Nobody knows that you picked their paper. Okay, guys, ready? Okay, and these for you all.
By me.
Thank you so much. I want to talk a little bit about what we saw happen. I'm wondering if it's best for us to move back inside for this part so that we can all kind of hear a little easier and be a little more comfortable. So sort of take a mental snapshot of what you see, and let's go ahead and find our spots back inside, and then we'll debrief. And we'll ask.
Would one of you be willing to share some thoughts about what you saw happening? Hand that off to you.
Well, it appeared to me that they were doing something in pairs and trying to stay within a certain distance of a partner or something like that.
Okay.
Probably, but I've got to.
Anything else you observed about this?
Part of that.
We kind of stayed like.
We've got 45 minutes.
No.
Okay.
Maybe not as good as an observer as I thought.
Do you think the system was working? Did it look like it was working in a way that was intentional, like it was supposed to be?
Moderately, like some were kind of confused, I would say.
Okay, so there were
about
some
it.
parts of it that
Yeah.
didn't seem to make sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And other observations? Thank you.
I agree, but it was kind of chaos at first, so I just kind of honed in on one person, and I don't know where Kay is, but I started watching her, and she was watching two people very specifically. She kept scanning back and forth, and every time she would either align or move, and so then I was like, okay, I'm noticing something here, so then I tried to find somebody else, and could notice they were also watching two people and moving, but it seemed like maybe it was a trio, and if it was, you guys were working well together to assess each other, or some other people were maybe not working so well together because they were all over the place.
Okay. Awesome. So you were noticing, you quickly decided, okay, from my perspective, At first, it looks like I don't know what's going on, but it might make sense if I start to pay attention to a particular piece of data. So this data looks like something that I can probably read fairly, and I'm going to pay attention to that, which happened to be a person. And then you were able to say, oh, that person seems to be paying attention to a couple of other pieces. So there's a little bit more data here that I need to be reading. And the more I read the data, the more I may start to figure out, there could be something going on. There could be some conclusions, which is kind of what Nikki said too. Like, well, it looked like there were some pairs maybe that were part of it, but they were kind of moving. Ken, did you notice anything different? I don't want to clock you in the head.
I didn't really notice anything different and maybe less nuanced than some of that detail. At first I thought that the group was all coordinated as they seemed to move together toward the center. And then once all the movement started, it just seemed like they were reacting to either one element in the group and just their movement seemed to be propelled by other movement within the group. That's all I could pick up. I didn't pick up eye contact.
Okay.
I didn't focus in on one person, but I think that's a great observation.
Yeah, but from your stance, your first instinct was, okay, there's a coordination of everybody. They're all moving it, But then you said quickly, oh, wait a second. Maybe that's not actually the right conclusion. There's something else going on that's maybe a little more complex. So from that systems observation standpoint, we have different perspectives of people thinking, okay, there's something, there's a rhyme or reason to it. Like I'm looking at these things and there's something going on. I know that the system is changing for a reason. I can't quite put my finger on what the reason is, or I think I have a theory about what the reason is. It might be there's pairs go, but wait a minute, I'm noticing that there seems to be, so let me tell you what was happening is, yes, each person chose 2 reference points and they needed to keep themselves equidistant from those 2 reference points. But the reference points were moving to keep themselves equidistant to other reference points. And what sometimes happens is I'm also noticing so Barbara, you're wearing a red sweater and Nikki has a bright red dress. Just out of curiosity, how many people, did anybody have Barbara as their reference point?
Because she had a bright red shirt on.
Because she had a bright red shirt on. I've done this enough times to know there's always going to be somebody that's going to pick somebody that's wearing red. That sometimes I've done this where multiple people, because it's a leverage point, because that red draws us and we choose that for like a mental model reason. We gravitate to the red and we pick the red. How many people chose Nikki as a reference point? Did anybody choose Nikki? Oh, you were
Melissa maybe. Melissa's great. Yeah.
You can tell I'm almost done. Yeah, Nikki, you was an observer. Okay, yeah, so Melissa's wearing a bright color too. How many people chose Melissa? Did anybody choose Melissa? Okay, so there were several people that... Do you know why you chose Melissa?
Color.
Because of the color. So that's a leverage point. Just as an example in a system structure like that, when we're doing an activity like we were just doing, color can definitely be an influencing factor. It can definitely be something that causes, it's a mental model, so it can definitely be part of our reason why we choose to focus on that, and then that makes that person a leverage point, because the more that person moves, it's going to cause all these other people who have her as a reference point to move. So you can see how there can be those strengths in different parts of the system. So thinking about all of those, let me see. I want to make sure to just touch on that we built a fairly complex system out of a very simple set of rules. I gave you one rule, and we created that very complex system. Systems are composed of interdependent parts. All of you were all interdependent. You were all moving in relation to one another. So you were very, very connected. Not everyone moved at the same time. Oftentimes there were delays because the person that you were in a good spot, and then all of a sudden somebody over there would move, which would cause them, and now you have to move. So there's a time delay that would happen. Time delays, that's one of the habits of systems thinkers. It's very, very important for us to be thinking about time delays, because sometimes, and I think we're famous for this in education, we take an action and then we go, oh, that didn't work, and we drop it and we move on to something else. We don't give that action time. We don't recognize and honor that there are time delays. We tend to expect the system to stop, but our system never stopped. I suspect if I had, chosen to stand there and let you keep going, you'd still be out there moving around right now, trying to find, sometimes systems will stabilize, but ours was a pretty complex system. There were a lot of pieces in our system, so it was probably going to keep moving for a while. And oftentimes we pay attention only to whom we are following and not who is following us. How many of you figured out somebody was following you? Did you figure out that you, oh wait, every time I move. So sometimes you notice, sometimes you're paying only attention to who you're following, sometimes you notice, did anybody not notice who was following you at all? Didn't figure it out at all, because you were too busy looking at the other pieces that you were trying to follow, right? So it's that perspectives piece of it. You're in the middle of that system, you're paying attention to what's in front of you, and you're not seeing what's also following you and what's behind you. So any of the habits could come up in this. We could apply the big picture, we could apply changes perspective, leverage, consequences of action, structure generates behavior, all of those things. And even knowing all the rules and the parts, you can't predict exactly how this system's going to behave. Even if I had said to you, all right, tell me who, everybody point to the people, who are your reference points? Even if you knew that before I said go, do you think it would have changed what happened when I said go? Would you have organized yourselves differently somehow? Do you think you could have? Think about the complexity that would have been involved. So, we might have tried. It would have been very challenging, I suspect. So, okay, I need to turn it over to Noel, who's going to take us to lunch. And I thank you so much for participating in some of our games. Keep those cards handy as we go through the rest of our day, and I will see you again.